What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. We're back from Possible in Miami. Everybody's hangover is done and we are well rested. And we are here with advertising legend Winston Binch. Winston's the chief brand and experience officer at GALE within the Stagwell network. He works with brands like the NBA, Delta, and Chipotle, to name a few. He's a 46-time Cannes Lion winner, the 4A's 100 People Who Make Advertising Great list, and Adweek's 50 Most Influential Execs in Advertising, Media, and Tech. Prior to GALE, he was the Chief Digital Officer of Deutsch and a partner at famed agency Crispin Porter Bogusky. Winston, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it's gray hair that basically.
So I know I gave a little bit of a preamble there, but any other notches on the belt that you want to walk us through in your background? Maybe give, a lot of people trying to get into the industry, watch the show, or are looking for their first major role. And I always love to hear people's origin stories too. So where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And what got you into the business?
Well, I grew up in Connecticut. I'm in New York now, so right down the street. And with ambitions to either be an ice hockey player or a rock star. So I always battle athlete or artist. It's kind of been and I've always had that kind of duality.
Yeah.
And, went to a school in Connecticut called Trinity College, where I studied history and performing arts. I played sports. I played ice hockey and lacrosse for 2 years. And then I went abroad to New Zealand and had kind of my Jack Kerouac moment where I'm like, wait a second, I'm not going to be a pro athlete. And maybe I need to lean more into the art, my artistic interests. So when I came back, I went full into music and theater and doubled down there. And then I left after college. I came to New York City with ambitions to be a working musician, and I also did a little bit of acting, but that didn't really pan out. I was in one ad, like a baseball, like a print ad, and that was it. Very short-lived acting career. And so I played in a touring rock band for 5 years. Called Stereo Bait, which was a indie rock band, mostly instrumental stuff. And we toured around the East Coast, all up and down, Chicago. We did tour out there as well. And, for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of have a creative life. Working as a musician was one thing. But, advertising was the last thing on my list, literally. And,
wow.
A funny story I have about that is, my name's Winston. And so growing up, wherever I went, someone would say, Winston, tastes good like the cigarette should. Like the cigarette should. And I'm like, man, that thing is sticky and memorable, but dang, is it invasive and annoying. And so I kind of grew up with this aversion to advertising and never considered it. When I was playing in my band, though, this kind of late 90s, a lot of people, this was like Web 1.0. It was before the .com crash. And a lot of the musicians I knew were either web designers or web developers. That's what they did for their day job. And I was doing I was working in TV and film and production. I was a PA. I thought I might want to go into the TV and production world, but it was pretty abusive. I'm like, and I always had an authority problem. So I'm like, I don't like getting yelled at all day. So, I was like, this digital thing is kind of interesting. And my good friend got me a job at Sony Music in 2000. So I ended up running digital production and design and creative for SonyClassical.com. And I made websites for artists like Yo-Yo Ma, Josh Bell, all these classical music luminaries. And I knew nothing about code, nothing about websites. In fact, my friend, he made a website and he showed his boss and he said, I made it. So I'm like, it was kind of, my career started on a lie. So I got in the door, and then I'm like, this is awesome, because there were no rules, right? It was the Wild West, and there still are very little rules in digital and marketing, right? It's
Yeah.
changing all the time. And we were like the young bucks. No one kind of knew what we were doing. We were allowed to just create and make whatever we wanted. We got had access to these great artists. And back in the early days of the web, right? You did everything. You did the UX. We called it IA. You did copywriting. You did the production. You managed the whole project. So I've always been involved in all aspects of marketing, and never really loved just doing one thing. Uh,
Mhm.
and then so I was there for a few years. Then Napster emerged, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the music industry, I got to witness at a front row seat to just the annihilation of an industry
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
over, overnight. And also the hubris that came along with, like just seeing leadership and denial about the change and the evolution, innovation that was happening. Everyone thought it was a fad, peer-to-peer music,
Mm.
right? And then I survived maybe 5 rounds of layoffs. I don't know, there were a lot. But I was out on the street, and that was like around 2003. And at that time, I'm like, you know what? I like this digital thing. I want to stay in it. I was also an athlete, as I mentioned. And, I looked around for like months, and I started my own web consultancy, did that for a while. And I really loved what Nike was doing at the time. Nike,
Mm.
like, people now we're talking about what's happened to Nike, where, maybe they've over rotated to performance marketing and digital. But back then they were like the kings of brand in digital, like brand e-commerce leaders, Nike.com, Nike basketball, Nike football, everything they were doing was really innovative at the time. And Amazon was growing, right? But everything was like, most of the web was so functional. And then they brought like some soul, and these were the days of Flash and big animations, and Nike Lab, all that was like really creative, amazing stuff. So I found out like the agency who was doing that, it was this company called RGA, famed agency.
Mm. Yep.
And
Mhm.
I had I had a friend who worked in HR. And for those of you just getting going, your network is your value, right? From my
Mhm.
getting me and making that fake website to having it in at RGA through HR. I interviewed like 5 times there. It was hard to get a job because this was after the dot-com crash in New York,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
there wasn't that much going on. And startups really hadn't become a thing yet. Like if you were a creative person at this time interested in marketing, there weren't that many options. There were agencies, or you could go work at a brand maybe. Um, so I wanted to go work at RGA on the Nike account. And I finally got in. I ended up working on Nike ID, the shoe customization platform, learned a ton about e-commerce, design development, worked on tons of early content for Nike football, worked with incredibly smart people. I was very intimidated. RGA was
Mm.
full of people from MIT, people with much bigger brains than me. But early on when I was there, I'm like, these guys are really smart, but I think more of my style, I want to bring some creativity and chaos to digital. And in 2003, there was a website made called Subservient Chicken, which was
Mm.
really one of the first viral digital hits from a brand. And all it was a guy in a chicken outfit, and like really grainy, crappy looking, and you could type any command. This is like a crude version of AI. Um, you could type any command, and the chicken would do like any number of crazy things, and it just blew up. And I remember being at RJ going, "What the heck?" It was like everything we weren't doing. We are putting everything into like premium design, great user experience, and all great things. Driving, being part of that, e-commerce revolution. But I'm like, there's something here, using web and digital in a way to drive buzz for brands. Um, And then so I followed Burger King, and I kept seeing more of these crazy Burger King ideas. So I found out who did it. It was this small agency in Miami called Crispin Porter and Bogusky. And I'd never heard of them. And I didn't go to ad school. I didn't, follow any kind of traditional advertising path. I didn't go to design school. I didn't do any continuing ed program. So I didn't know about agencies really. Did some research on CPB, ended up connecting with them, flew down there to Miami. And when I got to Miami in 2005, it was right after Hurricane Katrina. And
Oh, wow.
Hurricane Katrina, like, it ripped, and CPB back then was in Coconut Grove, and it's part of Miami. And when I got to the office for an interview, there was no roof on the building. It was like
Holy cow.
plastic. And yet the amazing thing is no one cared. Like, there was such a buzz and energy about the place. I was just intoxicated. I'm like, it feels like a creative revolution is being hatched here.
Yeah, I remember I went out to the Boulder office early in my career, and it was the prototype of that early just funky office with, it was all like plywood, and they had like a digital Sherpa who would, either like go get your laundry or put your bike rack on or go pick up food for you, and you could pick up a phone and order a pizza from, I forget which brand, I don't want to butcher it, but it was one of the big brands. You could like
Domino's.
pick up a phone, and it was Domino's. Yeah. And they would bring over a pizza anytime. And it was like that prototypical agency that just, was like obsessed with culture and their people.
Yeah. Well, they had no reverence for advertising or mass nav. They were like this tiny shop in Miami, and it wasn't so tiny when I got there, probably 300 people or something, but like, it still felt like this outlier, that they were viewing marketing very differently. Culture jamming was kind of the thing. And, I had been on the cover of Time magazine, that like, they were moving. And so I was there for 6.5 years. It was like a career defining experience, just working with, it's the right time. So much of this is like timing, luck, ambition, desire. For me, the thing is like, I had rock star ambitions. I wanted to take that same ambition with me when I went into marketing. I wanted to make great innovation that like moved business, moved culture, did everything. And, I had like that competitive streak in me as well. And when I got to CPB, everyone kind of had that in them. They were from all different places, but we all wanted to do the best work in the world. That was like the mission. It's like, that's what we're going to do, and change the game, like, and invent. That was another thing I loved about that, is that, everyone thought more like an inventor than like a message maker or a filmmaker. People that were passionate about film, but CBB wasn't known for film back then. They were known for stunts, innovative digital ideas, and so on. And when I got there, the mission was, I worked really closely with Jeff Benjamin, who's now the global CCO of Tombras, a great friend of mine, and was an amazing partner. And, Alex Bogusky was one of the, leaders, paired us together, and he's like, Jeff's got these great ideas, but he needs help making them and bringing them to the world. So I really came in that door as a producer. And, and that's what early in my career, like I was technically a producer, although again, I never felt comfortable with just like a single title. I've had a lot of weird titles in my career, kind of explains it. But, we got there, and like, we went on a tear. And, from doing, the Domino's pizza turnaround to the Domino's pizza tracker, all of the innovative work we did with Burger King, Whopper Freakout, and beyond, Whopper Sacrifice, and tons of great things. The Amex Small Business Saturday.
That one's huge.
What I learned there's a couple key things I learned, because that was basically my, advertising boot camp. I didn't know anything about advertising. And one is the power of brevity. I remember like I wrote like a long email to Alex, and he refused to read it. Because in RGA, it's like Amazon, right? Jeff Bezos, we're going to write memos, and everyone's going to read these long memos. So if you come from a digital culture, that's very common. And
Yeah.
we would write like these giant manifestos and email, explain user experience, all these things. I got to get to Crispin. I'm like, no, it's got to be one line. So
Wow.
that really helped me because, even my wife now tells me my greatest skill is being a summarizer. But I didn't have that skill, right? Like that was learned. So that was
Wow.
the thing. And then, the other thing that happened there was just like we hired, we had one of my other good friends, Scott Prindle, is a amazing technologist. He was at RGA for 12 or so years, a key driver of all the Nike innovation. And we brought Scott in. And so we had brought technologists. We had about 100, 150 developers at one point, and we put them in the creative department. And
Mm.
you may have remembered this right in the 2000s, this new term came out called creative technology, the creative technologist. And Scott actually came up with that because
Wow.
we were trying to figure out how to get technologists on an ad agency scope. So we're like, we got to put creative in front of it because then clients will pay for it. But the benefit of that was having, CPB was known for the power of its and provocativeness of its ideas, but over the course of 2006 to and beyond, we were able to really take on this enablement kind of capability as well, where we're building tech and building a lot of it and like really advanced stuff that a lot of the more pure play digital shops had done previously. So we kind of blended this, kind of Madison Avenue meets Silicon Valley idea, and Nick Law talked a lot about that, but we were trying to do that in Miami as well. And it was fun. It became for years, it was like RGA and CPB kind of battling it out for Interactive Agency of the Year and different ways in. One was more through user experience and great design. Our way in through was like crazy ideas.
Mm.
So I was there for till 2011, and then loved it. We built this, scaled the agency like 1,200 people. We were in Sweden. We were opening shops all over the world. I got to become a partner there, which is a real great honor, and just because there were so many fabulous people there, and I owe a lot of my success to the team, and the team is your worth as well. And then from there, a guy named Mike Sheldon, who I think you may know, was in LA.
Yep.
He started calling me. I'm like, and he was from Deutsch LA. And I'm like, I knew Deutsch, from being from the East Coast. But again, I had my idea of the agency Deutsch was like kind of in this like the bad advertising kind of zone. I didn't want to work in an ad agency. I
Yeah.
wanted to work in an innovation company. So I just didn't return my calls. I'm like, nah, thank you. No. And he kept calling. And then I think I met him in Cannes one year, and they had just won the Volkswagen business. Funny story there, right? Or like the connection point is we had at Crispin, we had Volkswagen, after the Arnold years, and did some amazing things. Safe Happens was probably the most well-known campaign we did, where we had people in a car crash happens in the ad, safety ad.
Yeah, I remember that one. And then Deutsch had the Star Wars stuff, right? The Star Wars.
They did. So they were kind of like the black sheep. Deutsch LA, founded in 1997. Had done Mitsubishi, kind of like good middle of the road, traditional advertising. But they won the Volkswagen business. They beat out amazing agencies like Wyden, and so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then another former partner of mine, Vic Palumbo, is a legendary producer. Vic was at Fallon for years. Worked at Wyden, just amazing craftsperson, and he was there. And when I went to meet the team, Vic told me this thing. He's like, look, take the Deutsch name out of it, right? And if you just look at the logos on the page, what do you see? And he's like, Volkswagen and PlayStation, some really amazing brands. And he's like, that's opportunity. And I'm like, that's a great point. And so I wrote a pros and cons list, and the pros like way was massive. And what I loved about it was at CBB towards the end of my tenure there was 13 partners. There was a lot of us. And, you always want to leave a place better than you found it. And I felt like, my time has been done. I lived in Boulder, Colorado at the time, and huge skier. And that was awesome. But my family and I were like, this LA thing could be pretty cool. And what I love the challenge is I love transformation. I love taking something from A to B, changing its colors, making it, changing the perception around it. And, it was the mission around CBB was like, how do you take an idea company and to make them into like a tech innovator? How do you take, and for Deutsch, to me, it was like, how do you take this really strong agency that's clearly good at new business and turn them into like an innovation, an integrated integrator, right? Like someone great digital, great creative, but, really become one of the most creative companies in the land. And I love the challenge of working with Mike and Vic and team. I love that challenge. So I took that. I was there in LA for six years. Then I moved back east and I ended up taking over Deutsch. I think it was like Chief Digital Officer in North America. So I was going between the New York and LA office. And
Is
then
that when you became a Kings fan?
Well, the Kings fan goes way back.
Okay.
The Kings fan goes way back. And a lot of people are like, my dad was actually drafted by the Rangers in 1969. So this is very like controversial in our family.
I bet.
But when Gretzky, the great one, came down to the United States in the like 80s, I was playing hockey, right? This was a huge deal. And my team in Connecticut, we all got Kings jerseys. Yeah, my favorite player was Bernie Nichols. That's like an old poll, but like, so we were all like, we were getting on the Kings bandwagon back then.
Nice. So that wasn't a LA thing.
No. And then when I moved to LA, I moved around, and wherever I go, I try and adopt the teams, right? I want to go see, I went to see Panthers games when I was in Miami, and, I started going to Kings games, and I didn't really know that they were like on the cusp. This was 2012. I showed up right at the right time because they won the state in 2012. Awesome. But I showed up in LA in 2011. So I started going to the games, and I just got swept up by the cup run, saw it. My daughter got to see the win in 2014. And my daughter also played hockey at the Toyota Sports Center where the Kings play. So it was a lot of the players, and it just became kind of a thing, a little bit of an obsession that's really painful if you live on the East Coast, because it means you don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, I saw your Twitter is mostly your Kings commentary these days.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what to do to Twitter. That's like the one thing I do with it now. I used to use it for a lot of other things. Now I'm kind of more thin guy.
Makes sense. So going back and forth between the New York office and the LA office for Deutsch. Sorry to take you too off track with there. So when did the draw to go back to MDC, now Stagwell, start to come into vision?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I was actually trying to escape advertising. I was trying to get out of agency world and leave because, from about one of the things that drove a lot of our success for Domino's, for Amex, for these huge brands was the ad agency had a direct line to the CEO. In the 2000s, we were invited into the boardroom. Marketing was an important member of those kind of board level conversations. And with the rise of tech, I saw this happening in real time. And, a Twitter story too is I had Biz Stone come and speak at CBB soon after Twitter was launched. It was an amazing talk. I took him out to dinner, and then he's like, "Hey, dude, can I get a freelance gig copywriting?" I'm like, "What?" Like, you work at Twitter, and it was still early days, right? And then a couple weeks later, they got 38 million. I never heard from him again. And the point is, I saw this rapid rise. With Whopper Sacrifice, we were very tied into the Facebook crew on the early days when we were making apps, and So I had a front row seat again to the kind of digital disruption that was happening to advertising media, maybe more so than others because I'd lived through this kind of thing before. Another thing that happened, so around 2010, like you started to feel the influence of ad agencies starting to kind of dwindle. Like,
Mm,
and there was just these moments that happened. Um, one of my favorite clients, who is the CEO of H&R Block, Jeff Jones. He used to be the CMO of Target. When I was at Deutsch LA, we did we had this program called D School, which is like a digital boot camp for C-suite. And
mm,
we ran this for PlayStation, we ran this for Target, we ran this for like many of our clients as a service. And, just trying to educate them on the latest, what's going on in the digital world. And we did that for like a few years. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, Jeff, why aren't we doing this anymore? He's like, well, Google does it for free.
oh, wow.
Okay, so not only are the ad dollars starting to shift to platform, now they're taking our work. They're taking our
Hmm.
clients. So the rise of big tech, right, was having an impact. And then also we saw a huge giant consultancies starting to come into the marketing game, which was new.
Yeah,
And
so that was like when Droga got scooped up by.
yeah, I mean that was a little later, but even
Okay.
we were running up against them. We did Taco Bell's e-commerce platform at Deutsch. Like I was seeing them more and more in the marketing conversation, and
Hmm.
so I'm like, And then I read Scott Galloway's book, The Four, in 2018, which basically predicted the demise of advertising and media. It turns out
Wow.
he was like completely wrong, but I was buying it, and I'm like, I need to get out of this business. And in fact, so I tried to go client side. So that was me. I'm like, I started on the client side at Sony. I'm like, maybe it's time for me to return. I've done a ton in the great stuff in the agency space, and I want to continue to evolve. So, I interviewed at like probably 40 brands. And that's the other thing for the people that are looking. It takes a lot. You have
Yeah.
to, I mean, it's even like doing great work. I was just telling someone, like, I've had some hits, but most of what I've done has been like not great. So you've got to like take a lot of chances, take a lot of calls, take a lot of interviews. And so I looked around and I couldn't really find something that fit. There were some interesting conversations. And then in 2018, I got a call from the CEO of Michael's, the arts and crafts specialty retailer.
Mm,
And he's
yeah.
like, hey, we're going through like a brand transformation project, and I need someone to help us steer the brand through it, and be our chief experience officer. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And again, I've been more interested in the challenge and the people rather than essentially the category. You know what I mean? And like, so
Mm,
I hadn't thought a lot about Michael's before, but that's kind of why I liked it. Uh,
yeah. New
and
tapestry.
yeah, and then so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, where are you guys on? Where are you? And he's like, we're in Dallas. I'm like, well, I'm not moving to Dallas. So I said, you know what? Why don't I like beta test my own consultancy? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna consult. I'll commute down there, and it was like I learned more. So I was there for 5 months, and I learned more in that time than I have in than I had in years.
Mm,
Side, right? The fact that creativity is only 30 minutes of the day if you're a client, right? And there's a lot of numbers, particularly in a merchant kind of driven and retail e-commerce business. Um, I also got to do an agency review. So I like got to bring in a lot of my friends at different agencies and sit on the other side and write the RFP, write the brief, meet with media agencies, sit in the boardroom again, sit and have those discussions about the brand, about the business. So I was really into it. So I wasn't like looking back. I had no desire to go back to agency. I'm trying to answer your MDC question.
no, I love it. I love your storytelling arc. It's this is one of the longer preambles, but I'm loving the way that you're blending in lessons learned and advice and all this different stuff. It's a compelling way to do an interview like this. So I appreciate it.
I stumble along, so please read
No,
it.
you're good. Keep at it. Yeah. So
So
you finish up the Michaels gig.
I was in
spent some
there.
time on the client side.
Yeah, and then so Bain Capital was the largest shareholder of Michaels at this time, PE firm, and Matt Freeman and Darren Herman, also good friends and people I've known in the agency world, were there, right? Like it just happened. It was one of those great moments where we had, McKinsey, IDEO, Bain, like there were some great minds around the business all at that time. And then there was also this agency I'd never heard of before called GALE. And Bain had brought GALE in because they're masters of like data and CRM and audience and loyalty program, and Michaels had needed a lot of help there. And I started working with the GALE squad, and I was like blown away. Like one of the things I've been trying to figure out at Michaels is like, who are the most valuable audiences? And I interviewed like 50 people in Michaels, and no one could tell me. I'm like, wow. Really? We don't know? And then I met with Brad Sims, who's the founder of one of the founders of GALE. He's now subsequently left and retired. But like within 2 days, he came back and he told me it's knitters and fine artists. I'm like, what? How did you get this? And he's like, well, we have this like customer data platform called Alchemy. It has millions of households worth of first party data. We match it to some of the Michaels stuff and we can pull this stuff out. And I'm like, wow. And so in this time between like 2016 and 2019, right, I was trying to think about like, where is marketing going? I kind of thought like, is it over? Is it like, am I out of a job? Like, are creative people, are we finished? And I'd also dabbled in AI, like early days. AI has been around for a long time, but like, in trying to think about what to do for brands. And I'm like, shit, we may be screwed. But then I started looking around and like, I'd done some work with Dollar Shave Club, another brand from the West Coast, Mike.
Great challenger brand.
Right. And I knew Mike well, and I spent time. I was very fascinated with like what he did for the brand and just his overall strategy. I looked at them, Warby, Goop, Harry's, all of these new upstart brands were like leaning into CRM and social to drive and build their brands. And I'm like, maybe that's where things are going. They're the MRMs of the world, the Wondermans, but no one had really done any CRM at scale. To me, that was like super compelling from a brand standpoint. And I'm like, okay, so I like this CRM zone. And Brad started telling me about the business. GALE was 120 people, very small agency at the time, but had come to, basically started out as a performance marketing shop building loyalty programs for casinos. And they knew a ton about audiences and data. I'm like, this is super cool. And he was like, why don't you join me and help build out brand and creative on top of this data foundation? And at first I'm like, but the more I got to talking to him and I met Jason McCann, was one of the creative leaders, and they were doing all this amazing stuff in BMW. I'm like, there's something here. This idea of like mixing brand and performance at scale. There's all this talk of performance, but how do we get brand in there? And then I had this secondary objective was like, if we want to keep doing great work, we need to get marketers back in the boardroom. And the only way to get marketers back in the boardroom is if you have people, your agency, who understand business. Because the thing I'd seen is like, the agency world is full of brilliant creatives, and I've been lucky to work with many of them. But there's also a lack of business understanding. And today we do strategy, but it's like lower case strategy. Like uppercase strategy gets into the like core of how the business works and what makes it go. And you have to have some people that understand data. You gotta have some MBAs in the house, and GALE could do that. And I'm like, maybe this is a platform to kind of reinvent that. I love their vision of combining like management consultancy, the Accentures of the world, with a shop that could also create world-class creative and then also buy media. That didn't exist.
Wow.
So in 20 long, that preamble took way too long.
No,
But
I love it. I
now I
love it.
the GALE in 2019.
No, that's great. Well, I loved that you weave, like I mentioned, the weaving of lessons learned and the people you met and all the different facets that you looked in the progression of your agency career. I think that was a great way to kick it off. So appreciate that. So I want to talk about something that you touched on a little bit, which is this kind of data meets creativity idea. I was watching an interview you did at Cannes a couple of years ago. This campaign called the Chipotle Doppelganger that you guys won some statues for that year. And it was based on a first party data insight where you would basically locate two customers in the world that ordered the exact same thing at the exact same time. It's a compelling idea. You spent a lot of time talking about how that also drove business results without having to have an offer behind it, just with the insight itself. I'm curious to how you think AI and the ability to leverage these LLMs, is that making your job easier to synthesize data and coming up with those data-driven insights to then build cool campaign ideas? Like how is that data meets creative being assisted by the hyper growth of AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you work and come from the technology world, you know that AI and ML are not new at all, right?
Yep.
And in fact, GALE, they were built into GALE's foundation in 2014 when it was founded, and now powered a lot of Alchemy, this customer data platform I talked about. So we are friends of AI. We've always been it. And I even before then, I started a group called the Great Machine, which is part of Deutsch, with some of our tech leaders there. And that was like, how do we bring brand and creativity to AI? That was the mission. It was a little early days. Everything was like in the conversational chatbot zone, and no one was really buying. But I was very interested, and so I've always seen it as this force multiplier for creativity. And so for us, it's kind of baked in. Now, like with all new tech, it's an experimental process, right? And we have our own LLM, alchemy.ai. That's something we use for like audience enrichment, insights, for social listening purposes to track conversations. We're using tools like Runway for video creation, and Firefly. But so that the way now that I'm thinking about it is really as an enabler, and allowing you to execute things at massive and epic scale that you weren't able to do before. There's a project we worked on recently. I can't talk about it, unfortunately,
That's
but
okay.
it was like what underpinned it and allowed it to be successful was our ability to create thousands and thousands upon design artifacts that if we had used production designers couldn't have been done. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think I mentioned the Scott Galloway book before, which was a great book, The Four, where he kind of like predicted the end of advertising media. And he was wrong, right? Because the pandemic happened, and then we saw the other thing happen, which is like we were 124 people. At the end of the pandemic, we were over 700, right? So it was like epic growth happened through those years, and still continues. It slowed down a bit, but we're still growing. And
Yeah, good.
then there's this new hype bubble, right? Which is like AI is going to destroy the agency business. Not true. It's just not. It's going to make it smarter. Some jobs will go away for sure, but that's been like always the case.
Yeah,
And
like
what
everything.
we're excited more about is what are the creative possibilities that AI can enable? Ari from Missing Pieces. I don't know if you ever watch any of his like video experiments, but I love this stuff. And so that's kind of not the best answer,
No,
but
it's good.
AI is like, you know, I want us to be using it more than even we do use it through concepting and creation. But it's a big part of where we're going. And, creator is the other part, so like to me, the shift now for creatives coming into business is you have to have like a curational mindset, which is like, who's the right talent? What are the right capabilities from a technology standpoint? Who do we want to work with to accomplish the business challenge, right? Whereas it used to be more like we take the business problem and then we're going to create ourselves. That's the way we solve it. But now it's much more strategic. You have to be strategic coming into this business today.
Yeah. You also had a really great quote that I read today. You've said that brands are no longer competing against other brands. They're also competing against creators. I thought that was pretty insightful. The idea that, sometimes brands are competing against creators because creators are creating brands that will then compete against them if they don't co-create.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of disruption from creator-led brands. I think maybe there was a bit of an overhype too, because just because you're a celebrity, that doesn't mean a brand is going to be successful, even if you have a massive audience. Because if it doesn't become a lifestyle brand for you, if it's just something that, your team put together and then you let sit on the shelf, it really does take like a Dr. Dre and Beats style relationship to make a creator driven brand successful. But would you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first of all, I stole that line from Andy Pearson, who leads creative. And we do something at GALE called Brand Camp. And Brand Camp is a collaborative brainstorm session that we run with our clients, designed to come up with unconventional ideas fast. And a lot of times we bring in a guest speaker, and we brought Andy in. And I got to work with Andy at both Deutsch and CBB. He's one of those brilliant creative minds. And he's a great runner too. If you follow him, guy runs a lot, like really far, like for a whole day. Endurance guy. But Andy, and the Liquid Death team, Mike Cesario, like Dan Murphy, all just, they were cut from great creative cloth. A lot of them applying some of the things we learned at CBB and modernizing them. And, what I love what they've done is a few things. So Andy talked about this idea, which is true. And I've known it for a long time, is that, the public is more creative than the creative department. That's been the case since like YouTube emerged, then the iPhone, right? Like once creativity got democratized to these platforms, we just saw like crazy things happening from outside of the creative industry. So I've been tracking that for a long time. But what was really interesting about Liquid Death is like, they understood that, but they're like, most brands would acknowledge that, but they still look at their competition as the other brands in their category. Whereas Mike and Andy and team were like, no, we don't care about the competition. Creators are our competition.
Wow.
It's an attention war, right? We've all known that idea. But truly, if we are going to make our brand meaningful in culture, we really have to set ourselves apart from like the latest crazy video that we're obsessed with. And that's powered a lot of their creativity. The other thing I loved about them is they embrace the idea of tension, like full head on, right? Which is, if half of America doesn't hate what they're doing, they're like, it's not right.
We'll engage.
That is amazing, because I really always believe that the best brands stand for something. They're not for everyone. I've worked on a lot of challenger brands, and it's a mistake. It's bad logic and thinking to think, oh, challenger thinking only works on like, entrants or disruptors. No, that works for everyone. And, you should apply that logic. So the other thing that the Liquid Death team, we learned in that session, right, is that they treat their brand as a character, as if you were writing it. And if you were writing it in a Hollywood writer's room, what would Liquid Death do next? This happened, and if you look at their response to, like, speaking of Twitter, like Twitter hate, they turn it into a song, or they turn it into an album, or, content. And I thought that was really smart because too many of us treat brands like this static thing. You know,
Yeah.
we'll do a big campaign. Maybe we'll have some always on organic content. You know, we'll chase some trends, but we're not thinking about it as something like the way SNL would, right? And I think, you know, SNL has been so good because not just because of the quality of the writing, the comedians and the guests, but they've evolved and they react to things that are current, what's happening in culture of the moment. And that's how brands have to be. That's like, it really, and again, we've talked about this idea for many years. You hear a lot of lip service, but you know, I give Andy and that crew a lot of credit because they are living it. You know,
Yeah, well, they really figured out that engagement cuts both ways. You know, negative comments are just as engaging as positive comments, and if people are really love your brand and some
yeah,
don't like it, but then you also think about like the Tony Hsieh Zappos customer service team that used to turn their customer service
Mhm.
campaigns into
Love
marketing,
that.
right? Like, how do you turn around a troll? You celebrate them, and
Yeah,
you like if Liquid Death did a song about a negative comment, you know, chances are I'm probably going to give them a try and be like, wait a minute, like there's something to it, right?
yeah,
Like you're never going to satisfy everybody, but what a way to turn around brand hate and, you
yeah.
know,
I mean, they had
celebrate
this.
it and make fun of it.
I think it's Mike's quote, but it's entertainment brought to you by a water brand. Like
Yeah.
that's what I mean. That's the spot you want to be in. And I love what they do. They basically turn like a hate comment into like a slow pitch. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, we're gonna hit. We're gonna. That's like, get on. We're gonna play with it. You know, and I think
So
it's
good.
comedy gold. And again, not everything they do like lands, but that's the way it goes. Some are gonna
Yeah. I
land
love,
more than others, and just like a SNL episode, right? A couple, all you need is a couple to land these days. Then you get some viral spread. But so that's where I'm very aligned to that kind of thinking. The idea of striving to make entertainment, not ads. And I've always said the best ads aren't always ads, and
mm,
brands that are in this space. Look what Box to Box Productions did for Formula One. You
oh
know,
my gosh. Yeah.
right? Like now they're taking that model to all these different leagues, and hopefully we see more of this happening. It asks a lot of brands, right? Because brands have legal departments, they have boards, they have shareholders, and you got to be brave to take that stand. We're like, you know what? We are going to play by the rule of culture, which is like no rules.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, the idea of the unskippable ad or branded content, I think, it can't be overstated how effective it is when you see something like that F1 show literally paved the way for the sport in America.
Hmm.
And, there's every brand can do that in their own way. You might not be able to go do a Netflix series out of the gate, but yeah, no, that I think that's important. So you talked about this idea of brand camp. I want to bring it back to. I also read in a quote somewhere where you've been a big proponent of seeking outside thinking in creative meetings and brainstorms, trying to include more disciplines than just the art department and copy and production. Why is that important to the process to have that multi-dimensional cohort of people in the room versus just traditional creatives?
Yeah. Well, it comes back to my music experience.
Yeah.
I played in a band, a trio. There's three of us, and one of us would bring in an idea, and the others would build on it, or they'd say it sucked, and we'd move on. A lot of ideas died in the like, hey, what do you guys think? Let's move on. But there was always this, kind of. I learned from music about the notion of building on ideas, and that you want ideas in the room that are very different than yours, right? That's how like great music is made. It's the foundation of jazz, right? Just being able to listen and adapt from what you hear and build on things. And great creative directing, frankly, is just great listening, right? Because
Mm,
particularly if you get to a certain level, you're not the one coming up with the ideas all the time. You're the one trying to spot them. And that's like listening. So the ideas, and then, there's this like ideas come from everywhere, and you hear it like in a lot of different companies. Some creatives hate that notion. Uh, man, like I love it. And,
Mm,
and I've always embraced it. And like, even at RGA, right? Like RGA, we were super collaborative. Our Nike teams we were in like 5-person squads, like pods, and we had like a writer, a producer, a technologist, a UX designer, and it was very integrated. And like everyone had ideas. It didn't like it wasn't just the job of the creative so and so, like so to speak, to come up with the ideas. We brought them together, and the best idea always won. So I came from that culture and went into advertising, and it definitely was, particularly at CBB, it was like when I first got there, particularly, it was definitely the creative department is kind of driving all of that. Although I would also say one of the things that made CBB so great is the power of its strategy. And, so it was like strategy and creative were driving a lot of that, right? Like, I believe the strategy is the idea. If you get the strategy right, you're going to get the creative right. But anyway, moving forward, um, at Deutsch, we did these, I talked about D School. I talked about, and we talked about Brand Camp. And, some of the best ideas that we've been a part of and I've been a part of have come from these kind of group brainstorms. And that include business people, account people, clients, technology people, data people, media people, like influence. Now we have like the influencer team in there. We have creators in there, which is super cool, right? Because they
mm,
come at it from like a digitally native or platform native perspective. And it's like a stew. Now, the thing is there's a wrong way and a right way to do it. You don't like leave with a fully executed campaign, but you leave with like lots of ideas in a wall and opportunities and areas.
mm.
One that we did in 2023, we did this project with Aubrey Plaza for MilkPEP, and the idea was called Wood Milk. And we basically we brought Aubrey in as our co-founder to create a fictional milk product, basically kind of having fun with what I call the milk anything movement.
Like,
There's like
yeah.
cockroach milk, there's hemp milk, and like, even if you liked almond milk, everyone's like, this is starting to get a little ridiculous. And so, and then the other thing that happened is, and this is the great thing about like a lot, like we talk about luck and timing. So we ran a brand camp, not a brand cramp.
Hmm.
That can happen too.
Sure.
I get them all the time. But in February of 2023, we ran one of these brand camps, and we got tons of ideas. And one of these ideas was like, what if we turned like this wood table, and this is, into like milk. And we're like, okay, wood milk. We put it on the wall. We let it sit there for a while, and then Silk Milk, like one of the alt brands, came out with a campaign with like the Got Milk Nepo babies, and it was called like Next Milk or something like that. And our client and the board were like, what are we gonna do? And we're like, well, we got like the perfect idea just sitting here ready to go. So we kind of prepared, right? For this moment without knowing it, and had this great idea.
Mm,
So but that was an idea, to get back to your question, that emerged out of kind of this group brainstorm thing. And I'm a huge fan of Pixar, like, right? That company has had so many hits, great book, Creativity Inc. And they have an idea, right, called the Brain Trust, which is the creative director and the writer, essentially the CD and the director, rather, they own the idea, right? Like it's their project, they're pushing it forward, but they bring it in the Brain Trust, which is like a cross-functional group of people to get feedback. And anything goes. Radical candor is the mantra, and anyone has an opportunity to feed in. The director and the creative director can choose to ignore it if they want, but there's been this session where other ideas are allowed to enter. And that to me is the way. And it's, one of the things about GALE I really appreciate is We have 7 values. We had values before we had a website, which is kind of cool. So they're not just words on a page. And one of them is friends collaborating, and everyone matters is another one. So everyone is encouraged to participate creatively here. And it can be chaotic at times, like, but that's the process. Creative isn't a straight line, and getting to like amazing work is often like a wandering in the dark sometimes. And it's always helpful to get different voices in there.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a great process. So I want to take a little bit of a turn into your personal creative, a few questions about how you go inside as a creative and come up with ideas versus the team. You're an extreme athlete. You're a traditional athlete in the hockey space. You've talked about your love of skiing. You lived in Colorado for many years and got to participate. How does exercise, getting outdoors, doing the things that you love, maybe talk about how playing music, how do those things get you in the creative zone?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because it's just applies to so many different things beyond marketing, right? I mean, look, we're all trying to achieve flow state, if you know what that is, right? Which is like where the brain essentially turns off, your critical thinking turns off, and just ideas flow, things feel natural. And a lot of that can be done through sport, right? Like that's why people are obsessed with surfing and, skiing and all these things that, allow us to move in certain ways. And so for me, like, Adam Grant talks about the power of distraction. I think I've learned that the best way to crack an idea is not to think about it. And I always say you got to sleep on a brief, and you got to
step
away and take it with you.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like a really slow thinker. Like I'm not fast. So one thing I like is, when you're running or when I'm like hiking a mountain, you're just in the moment, your heart rate elevates. And when your heart rate elevates, like everything starts speeding up for me. So I like to take like an idea or a brief or a challenge with me on a bike ride, when I'm running, when I'm doing something else. And for me, it just has always worked out that like I've had some of my best ones or most clear thinking when my heart rate's like elevated. So for some people, it's like the shower. Like I'm pretty good in the shower too. Like I can get some shower ideation happening. But drive for some people it's driving. But like the distraction piece is really important. And I think one of the great things about it being at Crispin and Boulder is like Scott. I talked about Scott, our head of technology there, but Scott and I would just go for lunch and run around the reservoir and just like chat ideas. Like we did that all the time, and that really also like just trained me that this is the place and this is the way that you're going to get to like great thinking. Yeah, and I really value it. And it's then there's also the health benefits to it. So it's like it's pretty good. But you got
2 for 1.
Yeah, you got to find something to kind of distract yourself in a way that helps you achieve some kind of like flow state. And for me, like going fast, scaring myself a little bit, elevating the heart rate seems to do that pretty well.
Let's go. So I understand that you are writing a book. You kind of put yourself out there on LinkedIn and let your community know that. Probably some degree of accountability there, just making sure that once you post it in the real world, then it's official. But what are some of the key things that you're exploring? What got you staying up at night to where you thought you needed to get down a book on paper?
Well, again, this is like it's been in the back of my mind for many years. And in fact, I've been working on this for a long time.
Nice.
There were a few things that got me like motivated to do this. And there is an accountability factor, no doubt. But actually, I was genuinely interested to see if people, what they wanted to like, learn or hear about. It's like, I don't believe there are many experts in the world, and I would say I'm not an expert. I'm like an explorer. Like I already told you, I stumbled into this business. I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I'm just like moving forward. I want to create cool stuff and I want to be helpful. And so I've reached a stage in my career where I really want to be helpful and be a mentor and do that the best way I can. So I want to get my ideas down. But I've abandoned this project multiple times because if you ask someone, they're like, and they've written a book, I'm like, don't write a book. First of all, no one reads at all. Like we're doing
except podcasters read them because they have to do the research.
Yeah, exactly. You guys, I know we're writing for you.
Sure.
But there was two things that happened that got me back on the book track. One was my good friend from childhood, Chris Everdell, who is like a well-known attorney, like very accomplished. We went to a Rangers game, and I'm like, hey, I've been thinking of writing a book. I don't know how it came up. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna do it. I don't think anyone will read it. He's like, I'll read it, and I'm like, okay, I'll write it. Like if you're gonna read it, if I can get one person to read it, sure. It's like I want to, the other thing about writing a book is it crystallizes your thinking, right? Like if you write something down, you learn about what you want to know about. And so that's one thing. The next thing that happened, another fantastic book I read not too long ago was The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And one of the things that intimidated me about writing a book was the process. If you ask people to write a book, they're like, you got to do a book proposal. You got to write an outline. You write first 30 per page. I'm like, geez, I don't want to do it. Like I tried doing it. I'm like, that sucks. And the Rick Rubin book, he's like, just do your thing.
Yeah.
Do it your way. Write it your way. Fuck the process. Like do what you think, do it the way that you enjoy. And that's going to create value for yourself. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I just started writing, and really the themes are, having done this for a long time, when you write a book, you want to try and pass on some lessons that will be relatively timeless. Timeless is tough. I'm not writing the Bible, but I'm writing a marketing book. But I have seen consistent principles that last the test of time. Even in this age, we talk about creator, right? Competing with those things, like that's not going away anytime soon. So, but I've also this is an attempt for me to solve some of the frustrations that I see with most marketing. And so it's a creative take on the fundamentals. And I'm a big believer, innovation's my passion, but you get there through the fundamentals. Fundamentals unlock innovation. It's boring. It's really boring, but that's how you get to breakthrough creativity. And I'm not big on like academic takes. I'm not big on theory. I'm big on pragmatism. Trying by falling on your face, failing, running into walls, getting sued. My present employers, don't worry, I'm not trying to get sued again. But that's the way you do it. And so I want to take the complexity out of this thing called marketing, right? At the end of the day, we are storytelling. That's what we're doing. We're telling stories about brands. And having read Yuval Harari, I love his work. If you read Sapiens, right? The headline is everything's a story. It's all made up. Currency, language, societal structures, mores, values, the Constitution, they're all stories. And so I want to help people tell better, simpler stories. And so that's what I'm attempting to do. We'll see. May take me a while. Like a couple of people are like, let me order now. I'm like, wait, just hold on a second. It's going to take a little while. But, I'm doing it long-winded, but it's for me, but it's also, I want to pass on what I know. Maybe some people find it useful. Hopefully they do. And if you worked with me, maybe it'll just be like a way to go down memory lane. But I don't want to, it's not all rear facing, right? Like I want to be of the now and take lessons I've learned that I think will be relevant in 15 years.
I love that. Well, I'm excited to check it out, and we'll have to have you back on the show
Yeah,
to
we'll see.
promote the book when it drops.
Yeah.
Well, Winston, I know it's late out there on the East Coast. I appreciate you staying up late for our audience. Anything else you want to point people to as far as how they can learn more about the work you're doing at GALE, or anywhere you want to point people to connect with you directly?
Yeah, well, again, Dylan, thank you for taking the time for letting me tell my long-winded story and rambling
Of
story.
course. No, I love it.
But I love talking about it, the things I've learned. And yeah, I would go to check out Gale if you don't know Gale, like Gale.agency. We're the world's only business agency. To me, it was, I already said it, but like when I heard that idea in 2019, I thought it was revolutionary. I'd never heard it before. A company that blends, the strategic power of consultancy, but it has the ability to execute like a world-class creative shop and buy the media. It's pretty cool. Enjoy working there. So you can learn more about what Gale is at our website. Check me out on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I hang out. I do post like angry Kings tweets every while, but I try to keep it positive on social. Like I read a lot of Marcus Aurelius too, so I'm like, yeah, don't judge. But every once in a while, after we get bounced from the playoffs for 4 years in a row by the same team, it's hard to keep it together.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Winston, thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate you. For everybody at home, if you are enjoying what we're putting down today and you want to hear more episodes like this, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you might be watching or listening to the podcast. If you give us an honest review on Apple podcast platforms, that's how we find a larger audience organically. And most importantly, if there's a creative out there in your world, somebody in agency land, somebody at a brand marketer's position somewhere inside of a brand that you think might benefit from the conversation that I had with Winston today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, we will go ahead and call it a night. Thanks again, Vince.